It's my great privilege to introduce our second youth service today. We have three speakers this morning. They'll be Ethan and Leah and Elena in that order. And they'll be continuing our series, which started 2 weeks ago, based on the Beatitudes.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, I'm not too sure of the order, but my PowerPoint's first. So happy Sabbath, church. I hope everyone's good today. I just want to thank all the youth speakers from the other week. They did such a good job, and it's interesting to learn a bit more about the Beatitudes. And it's just from the Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, as we can see. So for those who don't know me, my name's Leah Perkins. So you may have seen me do the MC up here. This is my first time doing a sermonette, so just keep the expectations low. As I mentioned, the Beatitude that I'll be diving into today is, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." So that verse is from Matthew 5, verse 8. And the Beatitudes, it translates to blessed. And if you read through the verses, each verse in the passage begins with "blessed are." So blessed are those who are poor in spirit, blessed are those who mourn, blessed are those who are meek, and so on and so forth. So when I was first reading this short verse, a few things came to mind. And the questions that popped into my head were, what does it mean to be pure in heart? And who would we consider to be pure in heart? And how do I become pure in heart? So when I think of purity, I think of the person who I think of purity is Jesus Christ. And I think of sinless as well. So I thought, as human beings, we're inherently, sinful, and we have sin within us. So, is that ever a level which we can live up to? And I think when Jesus was preaching this Sermon on the Mount, I believe he was referring to internal purity and something which we can strive towards. It's not something which we can see from the outside. Becoming pure of heart is a relationship between a person and God. It's not something which anyone can ever look into or, see. And it's never displayed on the outward appearance, or sometimes it may be, but not always. Being pure of heart is doing what is right in the eyes of the Lord, and it doesn't mean displaying purity in the eyes of others. So I'm sure we can look around this room and think to ourselves, this person is pure, this person is impure, I saw them doing, the wrong thing on the weekend. But the truth is, we don't have the ability to see into someone's heart and to see what they're feeling, to see what they're thinking, and, we don't know what their true intentions are. Even a person's actions are not indicative of what they're thinking or feeling, or of where their heart lies. Only God truly knows what is in our hearts. So knowing this, we should not be judgmental of others. And there are multiple instances in the Bible where the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, the ones who, know the most, and they're very, very educated on this subject, they're the ones who are being criticized in the Bible. On the outside, they appeared to be holy and strict followers of the law, but Jesus knew their impurities of their heart and where their heart truly lied. So in Matthew 23, it talks a lot about the impurities, which we can see. So Matthew 23, verse 5 says, "Everything they do is done for men to see." It goes on to say, "They love the place of honor at banquets and the most important seats in the synagogues. They love to be greeted in the marketplaces and have men call them rabbi." In verse 25, it says, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of the bones of the dead and everything unclean. In the same way, on the outside you appear to people as righteous, but on the inside you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness." So yeah, a lot of the time it may seem on the outside like, this person is doing good, but, it doesn't always mean that that's how they're truly feeling on the inside. I think with nowadays, social media is a channel which people can show off all the good things that they've been doing. And I've been guilty of that as well. Sometimes I make it seem like I'm eating all healthy, or I'll take pictures of my run in Bondi, but really I'll just be like running to Macca's. So I'll be doing the opposite. But yeah, so it's all very appearance-based. And at the end of the day, you know in your heart what you're doing, and God also knows. Yeah, and we see a lot of people who are eager to do the right thing only when they know that people are watching. And this is what the Pharisees were notorious of doing. Having a pure heart is not about ritualistically following all the rules or outwardly appearing like a good person. Having a pure heart is devoting yourself to God and having good intentions and good thoughts. And from that, your actions will follow. In Matthew 23, verse 26, it says, "First clean the inside of the cup and dish, and then the outside will also be clean." So I think we need to all look inwards in order for that to reflect outwards, and that's in the way in which we are able to see God.
Morning, everyone. This is also my first time doing a sermonette, so we'll see how this goes. I'm Ethan, by the way. Yes, you probably know me from around the place. Nice small church, so we all recognize each other's faces. So, let's start. Matthew 5:9 says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God." I'll be exploring what it means to be a peacemaker today, rather briefly, and I'll start with a story. When my brother and I were kids, we used to live in Kathmandu in Nepal with my parents because they worked with ADRA, which is the Adventist Development and Relief Agency, in case anyone doesn't know. So that is me in the top left corner. I'm looking very different now, I suppose. It was almost 20 years ago at this point, I think. I was quite young at the time, so I don't actually remember much of this story that I'm about to tell personally. A lot of it was communicated to me, so I think I have most of the details. Anyway, we were driving late one Sunday afternoon in Kathmandu with some young girls from the General Conference in the US, and they were sort of nervous travelers. They hadn't really done that much travel before, but they were auditing ADRA in Nepal at the time. So anyway, they were, both 20-something. We'd had a hard time trying to get home from the other side of the city. There'd been a bunch of roadblocks and things, and we'd sort of got down to our last option. But then when we got to that street, it was closed because the king, who you can see here in his gear, he was using that road. But the thing is, they wouldn't just close the road for a few minutes, let the car come through and then open it up again. They would close it hours before, open it hours later. I'm really not sure what the reasoning behind that was, but anyway, that was the way things went. Thankfully, though, we were in a car that had a H on the windscreen, which meant hospital. So because we were part of ADRA, there was an agreement with the government where everyone who had any part in humanitarian stuff, hospital stuff, could just go through these roadblocks without any questions asked. But in this particular case, there was a policeman who was not happy to go along with that. So he was probably trying to go for a bribe or something, saying, "Oh, come on, no, you can't go through here, stop," trying to get us to open the window. But then Mum got a bit annoyed at this guy and said, "Come on, just drive, we're allowed to drive. Julian," my dad, "Julian, just drive through this thing." So anyway, the policeman, oh wait, I need to stay in front of the microphone, I can't really act this out. The policeman sort of jumped up onto the bonnet with his arms on the front, saying, "Stop, no, you're not allowed to come here." And then I was like, no, keep driving. He's not going to get run over, just drive slowly and he'll get out of the way. And Dad was like, "Well, okay, fine." So we sort of inched forward, and then this policeman, he got very, very cranky. This part I do remember. He was yelling out to everyone, "Oh, there's these terrible people, foreigners, they're here and they're trying to run me over. Do something about this." And there were about 30 or 40 drunk guys there, and it's sort of about the size of that crowd there. No fire involved. This story doesn't get that intense. Anyway, That's another story. So they all got really, really angry and came over and just heard something about, these bad people in this car. So they were smashing on the car, trying to open the doors. They ended up smashing the windscreen in a few places, which was, I still have that very visual memory. Anyway, during this whole thing, Mum was the only one who actually understood what was going on, because she spoke Nepalese, whereas the rest of us didn't. One of the doors on the car as well was actually unable to be locked. It was the back left door where one of these American girls was, and she was like 5 foot nothing. And there was like this huge mob of people coming over. Thankfully, though, the door was jammed, so no one actually got through. Anyway, so where was I? Dad started reversing at this point. So, if you can't go forward, go backwards. And there were a bunch of cars behind us as well, but they knew what was happening as well, so they were just as keen to get out of there as we were. People, they were trying to get in, trying to get Dad out of the car. It was not good, the mob mentality that happens and things like this. At this point, the policeman actually got quite panicked because he realised what he'd started. He was just angry, but he didn't want blood like this mob did. So he actually jumped in the back of the car as well. We let him in the back of the car, and no, he wasn't the only one who could figure out how to open a door. We let him into the back of the car, and he said, no, drive, get out of here, let's go to the police station so we can figure all this stuff out. And we thought, oh, okay, at least this guy's realised what's happened. No one was perfect in this story, obviously, but anyway, so we drove to the police station, which is a few kilometres away, so left all the mob behind. At the station, things were definitely better, but they still weren't great. So this is sort of where the peacemaker bit begins. This policeman, all in Nepalese, was telling his superiors that there were basically the same story that he'd been telling before. There were these foreigners, they were trying to get through a roadblock, they were trying to run me over, this is terrible. And then Mum in Nepalese, not perfect, but good enough to communicate, was saying, no, look, there's a H on the car, come outside, have a look at it. We're part of an organisation, we're allowed to go through, and the police weren't interested in hearing about that. Anyway, Dad was, in his wisdom, I think, not that Mum wasn't being wise as well, but I think Dad despite not speaking Nepalese, he had a bit of a grasp on how these sort of politics worked. He said to Mum, no, stop, let's just take it, there's probably going to be a fine or something like that, we'll just deal with it, this could get worse, we don't want to end up in prison here, this is not the kind of place you want to be. Mum did end up stopping, so they ended up being peacemakers. Dad apologised to the police in his even more broken Nepalese, the local name for the language, agreed to pay a fine even though we hadn't done the things wrong that they had said we had. And the fine ended up having to be paid on a different day, at a different place. Dad had to queue for hours to do it, but he had just agreed to go along with it. I think it ended up being like $20, so it wasn't a huge fine. We're glad that we went along that avenue. And I think at this time, I don't really know exactly what was going on inside Dad's head at the time, and he probably doesn't remember the specifics of it. But I like to think he was thinking about how Jesus would act in this scenario. Like when Jesus was before the Sanhedrin or before Pilate when he was being tried, he chose to accept what was coming to him rather than being argumentative and trying to defend himself and say, no, I'm innocent. Yeah, he just he stood there and his silence in many ways was what communicated his innocence. And no, also this isn't Dad's version of the story where he comes across really well and Mum doesn't come across as well. Most of this story came from Mum, so all good on that front. We can read about this behaviour of Jesus. It's a prophecy in the Old Testament, but I think it expresses it quite well. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He was led as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth. Isaiah 53, verse 7. Oh, these are all New King James Version as well. Unlike us in this scenario, us being my family in the car, Jesus was truly completely innocent in this scenario. We had sort of been bending some rules. We too are called to be peacemakers, as we can see in John 14, verse 27. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you, not as the world gives do I give to you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. Romans 12:8 gives us some more details and tells us to be at peace with all men. So if it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men. We still haven't got the specifics of what being a peacemaker is yet, though. Hebrews 12:14 has that same message for us. Pursue peace with all people and holiness, without which no one will see the Lord. So we know we need to be peacemakers. I think that much is clear at this point. But what is a peacemaker exactly? Is it just someone who accepts what's coming to them, like Dad with this policeman? Or is it more than that? I'd like to finish with some words from Ellen White from her book Thoughts from the Mount of Blessing. She explains what it means to be a peacemaker as a Christian specifically, and I think we can all learn something from it. Christ's followers are sent to the world with the message of peace. Whoever, by the quiet, unconscious influence of a holy life, shall reveal the love of Christ, whoever, by word or deed, shall lead another to renounce sin and yield his heart to God, is a peacemaker. Blessed are the peacemakers.
Good morning, Seb. Good morning, happy Sabbath. For those as well who might not know me, I was passing by a couple of times here. My name is Elena, and I moved to Australia not a long time ago, and I'm really happy that the first thing I found this church. It was very important for me to find my second home where I can come and worship God with all of you together. Thank you for all your prayings as well, because I'm Ukrainian, and it's as well really important to me that you are here with me, and just for your prayings as well for all people in Ukraine. All right. So as well, don't have your expectations, high expectations. The first time for me as well to have sermon, and plus in English. And still I'm on my way to develop kind of Aussie accent. Yeah, and I'm pretty nervous as well, so just... Okay, so again, it's a wonderful opportunity for us to be able to be here today in church, worship and praise our God. And today I will deliver a message about persecution. It's very complex and hard topic to talk about. So when I was preparing for today, I was thinking, okay, the first time, when you think about it, the first what crossing my mind was early Christians who were killed for sport and entertainment in Colosseum under Nero rule. Then I'm thinking, okay, persecution. I thought about Jews who were brutally killed and murdered, and it was not so long time ago. It was basically 100 years ago. And of course, I had a lot of it from my grandparents who were, I'm Adventist in third generation, and they were telling me how they were hiding from Communist Party because you were you were not safe back then. So they said okay, we were gathering at home just to pray, and because everyone was scared of the neighbors, because they can just, okay, those are Christians and you can be arrested, and even worse. So my granny used to tell me the story when there were no books, Bible was forbidden, and they were to print the books. They were hiding in wardrobes because you couldn't hear the noise. And when I'm hearing all these stories, I understand that I haven't experienced persecution so badly. Yeah, of course, I was born in country in Ukraine where at least there was a freedom of religion, freedom of speech. Again, there are two major religions, Catholic and Orthodox. I was a little bit mobbed at school, why I don't go on Sunday to church. But that was it, right? So about persecution, when I Googled it, it was described as a clash between two irreconcilable value systems, or the act of practice of persecuting especially those who are different in origin or in political views and religion. Yeah, it's hard to believe, but when I start to explore it a little bit more, that people were and still are tortured and sentenced to terrible deaths because they're facing God. And I was surprised that Christianity is the world's most persecuted religion. There was research in 2021, so it's pretty recently. And according to the World Watch list, every day 13 Christians worldwide are killed because of their faith, because they choose to believe in God. And it's just like a couple of, I just highlighted top worst persecutors countries that are still murdering Christians for what we believe in. And just, I want you to think about the time when you experience insults because of your faith in Jesus. What were those insults, or how did you respond? Was it anger? Was it, I don't know, you felt embarrassed, you felt ashamed, you felt regretful? Like we have different emotions because we experience different emotions because we are humans, right? And I want to offer you to open the Bible. So basically you can see the verse here in Peter the 1 Peter chapter 3 and verses 13 to 15. Now who is there to harm you if you are zealous for what is good? But even if you should suffer for righteousness' sake, you will be blessed. Have no fear of them, nor be troubled. But in your hearts honor Christ, the Lord, as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. Yet do it with gentleness and respect. And I was just reading this verse, and I'm like, doesn't it sound a little bit backwards? Is persecution actually our blessing as a Christian, or how can it be? When Peter was writing this to the early Christians, his time, I think these words are related to us as well. We can be persecuted as well in different ways. It's not that we have to be killed, but we can feel this persecution. I don't know if you have ever felt an outsider in your family, that you are not like others, that you lost your friends, that you were misunderstood by society, that you lost your job because you had to work on Saturday. There are like different ways where we are opposing that society rules. And the world we are living today is merciless and full of injustice, and people kind of have fear for those who are different, not like others. Sometimes we might, like I'm talking about myself as well, sometimes we might not understand why we Christians have to suffer if we don't wish anyone harm. What we are doing, we just want to promote His love, peace, and this purity of heart, right? And sometimes it just feels okay. It's so unfair because we are not like, sometimes Christians are depicted as some kind of cult, that, oh, okay, you're forcing people, you are like, you have to, I don't know, just, you feel a little bit humiliated, if I might say so. But the gospel we promote is based on principles of life, which, to be honest, are wholly at variance with habits and desires that the world is dictating right now. And the Apostle Paul in 2 Timothy, the chapter 3, I like this verse as well. All that will live godly in Christ Jesus shall suffer persecution. And Paul confidently highlights here that our faithfulness to Christ leads to persecution. But if you're reading the Bible, the New Testament, and all the life of the apostles, life of Paul actually serves as a living testimony to this teaching. Because when he was writing this letter, he was in prison, and he was actually preparing to die, right? And if you're reading about different other apostles, so all of in the early church, all of them experienced persecution for living a godly life in the name of Jesus. And traditionally, when I was reading some commentary of these verses, all of these apostles were brutally murdered, except of John, who was instead exiled to island of Patmos, and where he wrote the Revelation book. Jesus left us a great command here in Matthew in chapter 5. So I'll open the Bible. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when they revile and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you, falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. And in Hebrew chapter 11, if I'm not mistaken, we find a beautiful promise that doesn't matter what happens now on this earth, God has provided something better for us, right? And I want to explore one passage in Acts, chapter 5. I know it's pretty long. We will not read everything because Pastor Daniel said, please just stick to your time. And I said, oh, okay. And then yesterday I was like, okay, I have to shorten my presentations because you mentioned people like probably to grab lunch after they want to go home. So I would like just to highlight the major message here, just to see, for us to understand, doesn't matter how bad situation is, how persecuted we might feel, God is always there. Even we might not physically feel it, we know afterwards that he was there. He acts in different ways. We as people, we can't understand it. So this is a story about apostles, and about the qualities of their character, what we might as well embody in our life. Yeah. So, and through the hands of the apostles, many signs and wonders were done among the people, and they were all with one accord in Solomon's porch. And believers were increasingly added to the Lord, multitudes of both men and women, so that they brought the sick out into the streets and laid them on beds and couches, that at least the shadow of Peter passing by might fall on some of them. People were coming from all Jerusalem and even from the outskirts because they know, okay, this is a chance for them for their relatives or friends or loved ones to be healed because apostles were there. And then the high priest rose up and all those who were with him, and they were filled with indignation and laid their hands on the apostles and put them in the common prison. And sometimes I was thinking, okay, they were not doing anything wrong. What they were doing, they were just saying, okay, that people love is God, and they were basically healing the sick people. Why to put them in the prison? But as we know, enemy never sleeps. And so what we can see after what happened, but at night, an angel of the Lord opened the prison doors and brought them out and said, "Go, stand in the temple and speak to the people all the words of this life." And when they heard that, they entered the temple early in the morning and taught. And even being under death sentence, they were not scared. They went and they know that God said he will be with them. And what happened after is that priests had the anger was so strong, they still went, okay, we need to kill them. We need to put them in prison and murder them. And Peter said, we ought to obey God rather than man. The God of our fathers raised up Jesus, whom you murdered by hanging on a tree. So we can see as well how strong his spirit is. And then how God appeared here and how he speaks to them, shows his presence. Then one in the council stood up, a Pharisee named Gamaliel, a teacher of the law. He was well respected in this by these other priests. And he said in the verse 38, he said to the priests, to others, "And now I say to you, keep away from this man and let them alone. For if this plan or this work is of man, it will come to nothing. But if it is of God, you cannot overthrow it, lest you even to be found to find against God." And they agreed with him. And they wanted to, what happened after? They meet apostles and they beaten them, but they let them go. But they wanted to kill them in the first place, right? And how Jesus just was speaking through this man, a Pharisee as well, what is written here. And reading this passage, we might see what kind of qualities these apostles had, although they were persecuted more than we are now. We are very happy to be born in the country and to live in the country where at least we don't realize it in our daily life, but if to think about how it was alive and how it's still in some of the countries where Christians are brutally persecuted. And look what qualities the disciples have. Those who are meek, remember what Jesus said? They will have place in heaven, they will have place with me in heaven. Strong in spirit, they are merciful, pure in heart, they are peacemakers, and persecuted for righteousness. And what I wanted to say, just to sum it up, being a simple human, it's hard to rejoice, what Jesus said. Rejoice and be happy. And it's really hard to be glad when you are kind of rejected and despised. And every Christian has to promote peace and love of God. And every Christian at the same time is expect to opposition in really different ways. But we should always remember, we may lose everything on earth, but we shall inherit everything in heaven, and not as a reward for merit, but freely. And as well, what always makes me feel stronger, that Jesus is the one who suffered for us more, and who was persecuted in the most brutal, merciless way that we can ever imagine. And just to sum everything up, what we were talking about, having purity of heart and promoting peace, it's just this verse: "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life." Amen.
I want to thank the youth for presenting this morning. Thank you, Elena, for helping us to understand how we could possibly be blessed when we're being persecuted. Thank you, Ethan, for talking about the peacemakers, and sometimes that's very challenging to do that, but that's a wonderful ethic to hold. And thank you also, Leah, for talking to us about being pure in heart and the challenge that is and how it's not obvious from the outside. So thank you to all of our youth. Let's just bow our heads and close with a benediction, and then we'll have a final hymn. Dear Father in heaven, I want to thank you for our youth. I want to thank you for the message that they brought us this morning. And Lord, I want you to be with every member of the congregation who's come this morning to hear this message. Please help them to be encouraged by it in their walk with you. We ask all of this in your holy name. Amen.